In the engine bay of the Hilux with the power steering fluid, we're going to have to top up the reservoir and obviously top up those lines that we emptied. So before I open up this fluid cap with a bit of a rag, I'm going to wipe the top of the cap to get rid of any contaminants and stuff like that. So with that all done, I can take the cap off and we can top it up. So I've got some automatic transmission fluid, and you might think, oh, that's for your transmission, but in the service manual I had a quick look through that and it says that Pt.2 is suitable for power steering. So just on the front here, Pt.2, it's also got Pt.3 and an array of other vehicles and stuff that it can go in, systems and things like that. So I'm going to grab a funnel and top this up until it's almost to the top, because I know that I need to bleed the system. It's alright to overfill it currently because it's going to suck it back down into the lines and fill everything up. So I've got that security, and I know that it's going to use that extra fluid that I put into the reservoir. A little trick with these bottles: if you tip it like this, it'll run quite early and you might not get the right distance. And it also does that kind of like a glug glug glug, where it comes out in just big balls of fluid. If you turn it onto its side and pour it in, it's a lot smoother and you get a nice smooth flow of fluid. So with the fluid in there, I'm going to let it sit there and I'm going to jack the car up once I put the cap back on, and we'll turn the wheel left and right while the car's off and circulate the fluid through the whole power steering fluid system. So that'll get any air bubbles out and hopefully force all the fluid into all the little crevices and stuff that aren't filled just by topping it up. So we'll get into that. Alright, so with the keys in the ignition so that the steering lock doesn't lock the steering on us, we're just going to slowly turn the wheel all the way to one side, and then we're going to go all the way back to the other side. If it does get tight, just think that maybe it's hitting one of your axle stands or something like that. It is a possibility. So right there where it's tight, I'm going to jump out and check just to make sure it's not hitting the axle stand. I'm actually getting a full left turn, and then I'll do the same for the other side. So once we turn the wheels all the way to the left, it's got enough gap there, and then over on this wheel there's also a space here. Nothing's hitting, it's out of the way of the jack, everything like that. So I'll go all the way to the right with the steering wheel, and then we'll check it again. I might even check the fluid now once I've gone this way, all the way to the left. Make sure it's not too low, because otherwise then it'll suck air back into the system. We'll pull the cap off and see where the fluid's at. So it's slightly dropped a little bit, which is good. We'll do the turn to the right and see what it's like then. Say for example you're on the passenger side of the car and you end up with dirty hands, or if you've got gloves on, dirty gloves, you don't want to take them off. You don't want to touch the steering wheel, obviously. What you can do is come down here underneath, and because the car's still up on the stands, you can turn it with one wheel, with one hand, and turn it from the passenger side all the way to the right. Had to think about that. The same thing, pulling on the wheel all the way to the left, and now I'll just straighten it back up. And now we'll check the reservoir, see what's going on in here. I have just topped it up as well because it was running low. So that's dropped a little bit since I topped it up. So I've gone all the way to the left, that's as far as I can go. I'm going to go back to the right. Not too quick, it doesn't have to be overly excessive. Just nice and slow, let that air get out of the system, pump back up to the top of the reservoir, all the way back to the left again, right there, and then I'm going to straighten the wheels up, which is there, and I'm going to check the reservoir. The fluid's slowly dropping, it's going back down. I'll put a little bit more fluid in there to top it up. I might even leave it actually, because that's probably about the right height. I'll go left and right a couple of times and get more again, get the rest of that air out of there, and I'm going to leave the cap off this time. I'll just leave it, let the air just straight out of the system, because this has actually got a little rubber seal on the bottom of it which keeps the fluid in. So we'll do that and then see what it's like then. All the way to the left. Feels so much better than what it was. Before, what was happening was the old pump was aerating the fluid, so that meant that the air was filling up the space where the fluid was meant to be, so it was coming out of the reservoir cap and it was going all over the inner fender in the engine bay. So when I'd pull over somewhere and stop, it'd just keep pumping out. It'd just, you know, leave a big fluid what do you call it, a pile of fluid on the ground wherever the car was parked on the passenger side. So, which is also dangerous for other car users, because if they park there, they go around a corner, say it's on their left wheel, when they go around a right corner, when their left tyre is going to be on the outside where all that weight is, it could possibly cause like a bit of a slip with that tyre, which is dangerous. I definitely needed to get it fixed. So yeah, that fluid didn't really move much. So now we need to start the car and run it, and then check the fluid again. After I turn the car off, I'm just going to get under and have a look as well. Just make sure none of the lines are leaking. Obviously you've got that high pressure line, which I can't remember how high that runs at, but it's quite a lot of pressure. So just make sure there's no leaks, make sure the belt's all good. There's no fluid on the ground underneath or anything like that, so it's a good sign. Now the reservoir is close to the top, probably about the hot line. I'm going to start the car and run it, and I'll go through a couple of things, because while you're running the car, it's got to be at a certain RPM and things like that. They all matter, so I'll go through that in a sec. Now that we've done the left to right with the car off, we're going to turn the car on, and the car has to run at lower than 1,000 RPM, and that's because of the pressures, the different pressures that the pump runs at when the RPM is higher than 1,000. So we'll start it up, and then we'll do the left and right rotation. Just let the glow plugs go. Now it's alright because it's sitting below 1,000. Once the car warms enough, it'll sometimes you might find that your car it'll rev quite high to start with, and then after it's warm it'll come back down. So just keep that in mind. Mine's less than 1,000. You can see here it says times 1,000. That's what each of these little indicators mean. So this is obviously 6,000 RPM, which is way over the rev limiter, which is bad for your car. And you probably, this being a manual, I'll probably change around 2,500, 3,000 RPM. It's good that it's sitting there though. So what I'll do is I'll turn the wheel left, right, slowly, listen out for it and see if it makes any weird noises or anything like that. All the way left. All the way right. And I can actually feel the air. I can feel the bubbles in the steering wheel. Topped up the reservoir, put the cap back on just so it doesn't squirt any fluid all over the inner fender or anything like that. We'll start it again. Make sure that we're not over 1000 RPM, specifically for the Hiluxes, and we'll do the rotations of the steering wheel. I at least want to get 2 either side to be able to make it worthwhile and the whole system bled. See here, we're sitting nice and low. I'll just feel the wheel all the way to the left. And still feel a couple of spots of air there. Got a bit of a noise coming from the front after I did that left then. A bit more air. Can really feel it through the steering wheel. All the way to the left again. It's obviously going to be easy while the tyres are off the ground because I'm still up on the jack. Still up on the jack, should I say, and the car stands. After we finish this part of the bleeding process, we'll put the car on the ground and do the same thing with all the suspension under load. When it's on the ground, you should find that it's harder to turn, just a little bit harder to turn, but that's just because you're on the ground and it's rubbing on the floor. Down to the right. The steering wheel wants to return back to the middle now as well. So if you're driving, it's going to come back to the center. Straighten it back up and we'll check the reservoir. So looking in the top of the reservoir here, you can kind of see it's taken a lot of that fluid down into the line, so I'm going to have to top that up and I'll probably have to start again because it's probably sucked in more air just from me doing the 2 rotations of the wheel. So we'll top that up and then see how we go from there. We're in the Hilux here and we're taking it for a test drive. What I'm feeling is for any air and stuff like that, I'm obviously being cautious while we're on the road because it might go stiff or it might go really soft at stages, so you've got to be really careful and make sure that everything's working properly. So we'll just take it slow, take it easy, and for the first drive we want to be trying to turn the wheel as far left and as far right as possible, because if not, then you're not getting that full rotation out of both sides. And we'll just go from there, and hopefully everything's right. We'll stop, pull over at some stage, and check the fluid, make sure that it's all working properly. Just on this quiet little road, what I'm going to do is obviously watch out for traffic, but I'm just going to rotate through the. If I go all the way to the right, like a U-turn, and that'll push all the fluid and everything out of everywhere that needs to have the air removed from. Watching out for cars. I'm going to go up to this spot here and I'm going to do a really wide turn, watching out for cars and stuff. Just on this left turn here, it's a big corner, so I'm going to go a bit wide, no cars coming, and really turn the wheel back. Get that in through the system, make sure it's all released, and then once I get back home I'll double check it, make sure the fluid's in the right spot on the hot level, and check it from there. Alrighty guys, see you later. It's a couple of days later, but we are back here in the Hilux. I checked the reservoir, made sure that's all topped up. I've driven it around in the last few days as well. it's going perfect, not leaking, no problems, no sounds, everything's fine. So that's all good from me, and thank you guys for joining me in this video for the power steering pump on my Hilux. Now that we're in the car, we're just going to slowly turn the wheel left to right. So with the power steering pump, I couldn't get the drive pulley bolt to come loose, so I did a bit of research and found that this little trick might work, where you just turn the